Hello and welcome. This is Martin Morgan, Marketing Director with Repair Shop Websites, and I'm excited to have you with me today to talk about recruiting and keeping talented technicians. Before I get started, I want to share a little bit of a housekeeping item. I definitely plan to leave time at the end of the presentation for questions. As we go through the presentation, if you have a question you'd like me to answer or take a look at as we get to the end, please feel free to use either the questions box or the chat box that should be in that interactive box area for GoToWebinar. So you can certainly use either one of those. I'll check both of them at the end of the presentation. Again, I really appreciate you all being here on the webinar today, and very much looking forward to going through here and answering any questions that you may have. So with that, I am going to go ahead and get started. It gives you a little bit of a guide as to what we will be discussing specifically today and in what order. So I plan to start by talking about the size of the tech shortage problem. Then I'll move on and talk a little bit about culture and work environment and how important those are for your shop. Then I'll spend some time talking about recruiting great techs. And my goal is to give you some tips and tricks, maybe some approaches that you can use that you can start utilizing as early as this afternoon and maybe tomorrow, but really practical things that you can put into play. And then I'm going to touch on how to keep those great techs that you have, either those great folks that you have currently on your team or those that you're able to recruit later on. So first, I want to start by talking about the size of the problem. So this information is pulled together by the TechForce Foundation, and this is the gap or the amount of new entrant techs that are needed in the auto repair industry on average on an annual basis. And the initial number that they put together was based on the census for 2014 through 2024. And that number was that the need was going to be 23,720 new entrant techs per year to fill the tech shortage. So that's a pretty big number. There's no question about that. And of course, it's been some years as people have talked about how important it, or let's say how challenging it has been to fill some tech jobs across the United States. However, the TechForce Foundation looked at census data that came from the 2016 census, and then they announced a new projection toward the end of last year, which is even more alarming, unfortunately. So the new projection is that there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a need for almost 76,000 new techs per year from the years 2016 to 2026. So more than 3 times that number they had projected from the 2014 census. So you may have been experiencing a challenge in recruiting techs for some time, and it may seem like it's even tougher now than it ever was. And if it feels that way, the reason is probably because it is. Unfortunately, the news is if you haven't had an issue previously in recruiting techs, likely is going to be something that you will be challenged with in the coming years, and it may come even sooner than expected. As we look at 3 of the key reasons for this big gap, 1, the growing economy. With a low unemployment rate, right around 4% across the country, that means it's going to be challenging to find folks. Most people, not all, but most people who want jobs already have jobs, especially in very competitive markets and in competitive areas. One of those areas certainly being the jobs for auto repair techs. On top of that, there's been increased retirement. So probably back about 10 years ago, there were a lot of folks who thought they were never going to be able to retire. Unfortunately, as the recession was in play at that point, over these last 4 to 5 years, especially with a pretty solid stock market return, a good number of those folks have been able to retire, and certainly earlier than they expected. That's helped add to the shortage as well. You've got increased demand, certainly demand for techs, but also demand for auto repair. That may not seem like it in your location, but across the country that has been the case since then. So as the need for techs has risen, people have needed to add more to their team, and that's certainly been challenging when there's also been fewer entering the trade. And another big factor is increased vehicle complexity. So the skills needed to be a tech these days are certainly different than some of the skills that were needed even 10 to 15 years ago. With all the increased technology being deployed in vehicles, there's a number of additional skills, and it can be challenging for the techs to bring those skills, to learn those skills, and that's causing some of the shortage because there's a lack of the technology skills, especially among the techs. So that's the size of the problem. I want to spend a few minutes here talking about work environment and culture. So many of you may have seen this phrase, culture eats strategy for lunch. Unfortunately, this is misattributed to Peter Drucker most often as something he had said. It's not really something he said, but getting past that, it doesn't matter. Some people say culture eats strategy for lunch. Some people say culture eats strategy for breakfast. It changes depending on what people like. But the importance of the statement doesn't change. It's that if you've got the work environment, if you've got the culture, if you've got the camaraderie among the people in your organization who are determined, who are focused on one goal, who work together to achieve great things, that's going to be somebody who has a great strategy and not that same type of work environment all day, every day. Saying it another way, it's better to try to execute an average strategy with a great environment than to execute a perfect strategy in a terrible work environment. So culture, work environment, critically important, not only to your results, but also when it comes to things like recruiting and retaining techs. So when you think about your culture, when you think about your work environment, there's a few things that I'd encourage you to think through. Okay, the very first thing, and probably most important, is what are your core values? Do you have an established set of core values for your shop? You as an individual have core values, and the core values should match up to what the core values of your shop are. That's critically important. That dictates how people treat each other, how people work together, how they treat customers, all of those things, what the expectations are. And what's really important about that is that establishes the foundation of all your recruiting and your retention efforts. You want to create a work environment that will attract talented employees. Part of the challenge with that, of course, is you don't completely control the work environment. There's no doubt about that. You don't have complete control over that, and if you want to work toward feeling like you do, you're never going to get there because there's so many factors that are involved. Certainly the people that are there. So from that standpoint, you do have control on who you recruit and bring into your shop. But what you want to do is if you haven't yet established your core values, then you want to make sure that those core values run through your work environment. So that may mean that you have discussions with employees. Perhaps that's hey, here's what our core values are, here's what that means. And then you talk to them about that, what the behavior looks like that aligns with those core values. And you want to make sure that that runs throughout your shop. So some of the things you want to ask yourself when you maybe you already have core values established, you've already got them established for your shop, or when you get there, how do employees interact with each other? Like, what happens in your shop, and does it live up to the core values that you've established? Do your employees interact with each other in a way that supports those core values? Critically important. How would your employees describe the work environment? So when asked, and if you don't know, maybe you should ask them. However, what's probably going to be more important is how would they describe the work environment? How would they describe your shop when it comes to people in their social spheres that are out there, or people they might meet at in community events, or perhaps little league or dance types of things that their kids are doing. How do your employees describe the work environment? Do they describe it as supportive? Do they describe it as helpful? Do they describe it as they are encouraged to excel and do their best work? They've got the opportunity to do their best work. Or did they describe it as no fun, as a place where people don't help or support each other? It's every person for themselves. That's a key thing. Are your employees your best recruiters? And that's why it's so important, because in a lot of ways, people will be out there, and you want to make sure that your employees are giving off the best impression of your shop. And you want that to be natural. You don't want it to be forced. You want them to just talk about it in a way that they feel in their heart because they really believe it. And that's what they think about their job and what their role in your business is. So you want to make sure that your employees are able to talk about that. And of course, the way that they'll talk about that is based a lot on work environment and culture. And then how would your customers describe the work environment? So when your customers come in and they have an interaction, how do they describe that interaction? What might they tell somebody else outside or later that day or the next day or even next week? Because what most often happens is the people that talk about their experience as a customer, as a consumer, they fall in two groups. It's either the people that had just such an excellent experience or feel like they had such an excellent experience that they have to talk about it, or they're the ones that feel like they had a terrible experience and they're going to talk about it. So how would your customers describe the work environment? What do they see when they come to your shop? How are they treated by the service advisor or anybody else that might be in the front office area? And how are they able to interact with the techs? Or if somebody comes to explain to them what happened, if there's a big window that overlooks your shop, that they can see what type of interactions do they see amongst the employees. Does it appear supportive? All those things make a really big difference, because we talked about work environment and culture. Everyone owns the culture. Everyone that's in your shop owns the culture. As the owner, the leader, you obviously play a big role in determining how people are going to interact with each other, but it comes down to every single interaction, and every single employee owns the culture of your shop. This was something I had seen a few years ago, and I thought it was just a great way to think of it. And I certainly can't claim it as my own, but it was said in reference to brands, like the brand of your shop, but also could be considered the culture and reputation. It's like a sponge. It soaks up all the good stuff and all the bad stuff that's said about your shop. So when somebody looks at that sponge, what do they see? Is there a lot of really great things, or are there some not so good things that is going to tear them down or prevent them from wanting to come to work for you? So think about that from a work environment and culture standpoint, and how you can potentially change the things that you may want to change. So an important note here on what do employees want most. So my guess is, if I asked all of you on the webinar right now to raise your hands if you thought that the most important thing to employees was their pay, a vast majority of you would be raising your hands and saying, yes, it's their pay. That certainly might be true for some people, but Gallup did a survey March of 2017 where they really focused on what would it take for you to change jobs? What would be most important to you that would get you to change jobs? And they asked a bunch of employees, a bunch of workers, what would get them to change jobs in order. And the number one thing that would get somebody to change jobs is not pay. It's the ability to do what they do best. So 60% of the people said the ability to do what they do best. Number two, greater work-life balance and better personal well-being. So that's a potential advantage right there from an independent repair shop standpoint. Most often over the dealer service centers is hours, time, greater work-life balance. 53% of people said that. Third, greater stability and job security. And it's not until we get down to number 4 here where people say significant increase in income. The important note is the word significant. Everybody has their own definition of what significant is, but significant increase in income, 41% of people said that. So not even a majority of people said that that they would jump for a significant increase in income, but 41% of people did. And we just spent some time talking about brand and culture and reputation. 36% of people said the opportunity to work for a company with a great brand or reputation. So maybe a little bit of surprising news there. Almost as many people said that they would change jobs for the opportunity to work for a company with a great brand or reputation as those who said they would change jobs for a significant increase in income. Now, a word on pay. Generally, we think of compensation being incredibly important here. We say typically it's the second most important factor in job satisfaction. Employees think that compensation is definitely important for job satisfaction, but research has really shown that it's not as important as everybody may think. What is true, though, is that when people hate their job, they feel like they aren't being paid fairly. So if you hear around your shop somebody saying, they don't pay me enough to deal with this crap, or similar such statements, that's when you know you're in trouble, because that's somebody who hates their job and they're feeling like they're not paid fairly. Similarly, or to contrast it with, people who love their job consider themselves satisfied with their job even if they wish that they made more money. And I think wish is probably not even fair enough. They probably consider themselves satisfied even though they're pretty sure that they want more money. We all might say, yeah, of course we'd like more money. Who wouldn't say that? Some people may not, but a lot of people would say it. But for the most part, salary, job, or pay comes in as a factor only when people are unhappy, and then they point to pay. All right, let's spend a little bit of time here talking about recruiting great techs. So first thing I want to mention, don't keep your great culture and work environment a secret. So we've talked about the importance of culture. We've talked about work environment, establishing core values, live the core values, recruit to the core values, create a great work environment. And when you're there, when you've got that culture, go to the top of the mountaintops and tell everybody all about it. Because you should be proud that you've got that sort of culture, but it's also a great way to recruit great techs. Tell everybody that you know. Talk to people in the community. Talk to the people as if you have children and they have sports. They're in sports. They're playing games. They're in things like dance or in any other thing like that. When you've got the opportunity, talk about your great culture in your work environment. Be intentional about what you want that work environment to be, about what that culture is, and then tell everybody about it, because there's a great way to attract people. It's like a magnet to top talent, a great work environment, a great culture. Tell everybody that you know about it as you're out there. And what you want to do is you don't want to, not that you necessarily would, but you don't want to tell it in terms of you yourself as to what you've done, as much as you want to talk about it in terms of what your employees have done. We've got this great work environment. Everybody treats each other as a teammate. Everybody's the next one up. They step up to help teammates finish a job. All those types of things that really show how your employees interact with each other in a positive way. So that if somebody hears that they might be a tech, or they might be the spouse of a tech, or the parent of somebody who's looking to be a tech or is a tech, people are going to be attracted to that. They're definitely going to be attracted to that. So use that to your advantage. With that as a lead-in, emphasize your advantages. Critically important to use from a recruiting standpoint, the advantages you have as an employer. So if you haven't spent the time to determine exactly what those are, then I'd highly encourage you to take the time to do that. Write down the list. What you really want is something like 3 or 4 3 or 4 competitive advantages that you have as an employer. There's definitely things there. It could be the work environment that you have. It could be work-life balance um, opportunities as an independent repair shop. If you're open, let's say 7:30 to 5 or something like that, Monday through Friday, that's definitely an advantage over what somebody might expect to have at a service bays at a dealership. There's certainly other things that could be involved as well. And we've got a few of those on the next slide here. So independent auto repair shops are attractive employers because of these other things. A respectful work environment. So mentioned the importance of balance as far as getting people to change their jobs. That can be attractive. On here we talk about the regular working hours. I just referenced that, but also a respectful work environment. So you think about that from the standpoint with independent auto repair shop. You may say we all work together like a family. It's like a family. You hear that about small businesses sometimes, and that can definitely be an advantage. People take care of each other. You hope that most of the family aspects of it are the positive ones, not some of the negative ones when it comes to family, but most of them are positive. Everybody's not perfect, though, and you can't expect it to be 100% great. So that's understandable. Some things aren't going to be as good, but nobody has ever said that about the service area of a dealership, that it's like a family, right? So use that as an advantage. Know what your advantages are. And also think about it in terms of competing against the other people you compete for tech talent in your area. So it might be dealerships. It might be other independent auto repair shops. Hit those things that are your best. Maybe you've got great career advancement opportunities. It's a great, respectful environment, regular working hours, any of those things that are to your advantage. If you don't have things that you can list off, 3 or 4 things that are the advantage of working at your shop, then what I'd highly recommend that you do is you determine what 3 or 4 things you want to be your advantages, and then you intentionally go out to establish those as advantages. Maybe that means you do something a little bit differently. Maybe that means you're offering health benefits and nobody else in town is to the level that you are. What are those things that are going to make you special, make you stand out from other shops in your area? Not just shops, but other places that are working to recruit techs. And of course, the most important factor is always the respectful treatment of all employees at all levels. So the next important thing when it comes to recruiting great techs is always be recruiting. And as a shop owner or the person that runs a shop, that is one of your key roles, is to recruit the talent. And one of the ways that you do that is always be recruiting. So that might mean that you've always got your eyes out for potential employees. Now, more often than not, your next great tech is already working somewhere else. So an opportunity may be there for you to meet people who aren't looking for jobs while you're not recruiting for jobs, but maybe you come across somebody and say, yeah, I think it might be helpful if we go ahead and grab coffee and get to know each other a little bit in case there's an opportunity for us to work together in the future. Or maybe you meet somebody in the community that's connected to something else, and they've got somebody else who you need to definitely meet. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a child. All of those things. You want to make sure that you've got the opportunity to meet those people, but you can just do an exploratory discussion. Nothing exchanged, no promises. You're just getting to meet each other, learning a little bit more about each other and the opportunity that you may have to work together. I like to put this in the frame of coaches, and as a sports fan, that's one of the things that jumps out to me, is to use it from that standpoint. What you often hear is when a college coach or a professional coach is leaving, and either the athletic director or the general manager, they've got that list in their drawer. So what you want to do is you want to start building out your list of people who might be able to help you in case you lose one of your most important employees. So if your top tech were to leave next week, could you pull out your drawer and do you have a list of potential people who could take that spot? Now, it doesn't have to be an actual physical list, and for there are reasons why you might not want to have one of those in your drawers, but you could put it together and have it at home. There's other ways that you can do that, but what you want to make sure is that you're always recruiting, and in that way, if one of those people does leave, you've already got somebody that you think might be a good replacement, or even better, maybe a list of some buddies, 3, 4, 5 people that you could reach out to in the case that happened. Another thing I want to mention is your website and social media. So these are 2 great places where you can work on recruiting, and even when you're not specifically recruiting, they can be great assets to your efforts. So from some of the things that you can put out there, let's say you're participating in community events, let's say you are having an employee appreciation type of event, just having fun in the shop, maybe some of your great work, any of those things can be really helpful. And it's a great way to attract top tech talent. Another thing that you can do, and I've got the example here on the left side, one of our customers, they've got some pictures of their team members when they were younger. So it's a playful side. That shows people that you probably have a fun work environment. That is definitely going to be an attractive thing for top tech talent. Another thing that you can do utilizing website and social media, and this is probably more specific to website, and it certainly falls in the same category as always be recruiting, is to continue to take applications or to list jobs on your website, even if you don't have the opening. That way, you might have a continuous flow of people who might be interested in applying for that job, so that if a job does come open, you've got some people you can reach out and contact. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but what do I do if one of my employees says, especially one that's in the job, hey, I saw the job was listed on the website. What's up with that? I'm not leaving. Or is so-and-so leaving? The way that you approach that is talk to the whole team or individually if that seems better, and just let them know, hey, what I don't want to do is leave you all hanging, so that if somebody was to leave, everybody's having to work twice as much, twice as hard, and it's not a fun environment. So one of the ways that we're trying to prevent that from happening is we're trying to get a good list of potential people together in case somebody was to leave, that we can fill that position pretty quickly and get back to normal as quickly as possible, and make sure that nobody sees, or at least it's minimized, a problem with schedules and paychecks. Hopefully, they'll understand from that standpoint. If they don't, then I'm not sure what you can necessarily do. They may just not get it, but it's a good way to let people know that, hey, the reason that you're doing that is because you're looking out for everybody's best interest. Another recommendation from a recruiting great tech standpoint, and I know this is there's a lot of people putting good efforts into this. The Tech Force Foundation is one of them, and you all might be already working on these things or have your eye on this, but establish a talent funnel as much as you can. Get people familiar with your shop, get people into your shop, learn about who might have good talent. One of the things that you can do, well, and this could be you've got community colleges, technical schools, high schools, wherever the possibility exists that you can work with a local organization to help you establish that talent funnel, then go ahead and do that. An example might be that you may connect with a high school and they may have some sort of program, or they may not, but you may bring somebody in, a high school student in, for let's say 4 hours a week, give them a chance to do a little training, some teaching. Perhaps you've got somebody on your staff who wants to be a mentor, or who is a mentor to other techs and really likes that role, or somebody you might be able to help from a professional development standpoint because they're looking for that sort of thing. And they work with this high school student for 4 hours a week. You train them up, you get a good understanding of whether they've got the skills, they're a good fit for your core values, they've got the drive to really be a good tech, and then you can bring them on at maybe an apprentice type level later on, or something like that. But by working with people, doing a little job training, you might be able to find your next great techs. So this is an important piece here. Be upfront and realistic. When you're recruiting any role, not just techs, of course, but recruiting for any role, when you're talking with a potential employee, you need to make sure that you are completely straightforward with them, willing to represent things as they are, certainly want to be realistic, and you want to be upfront. Love to use this example because I think everybody has experienced this. So you see that commercial about pick a fast food restaurant. We all probably have different ones. They've got a new burger that they're launching, and you see the commercial, and man, that thing looks fantastic. It's big and juicy and just looks really good on the commercial, and you're thinking, oh man, you know what? I haven't been there in a long time. Yeah, that's right. I need to stop by there and try that. So you go through the drive-through, and maybe you're taking it back to the shop or taking it home, and it's all wrapped up in the paper, of course, and you're thinking about that commercial that you saw, and then you unwrap your burger, and this is what you've got, right? So it's kind of smushed. It's about half the size and doesn't look nearly as appetizing as it did on the commercial. You want to make sure that that's not how your new tech feels 2 days into their new job at your shop, because that is not a good place to be from a long-term retention standpoint. You want to be upfront and realistic. If there's something that you are working to improve, it's going to be much better for you to let that person know that you are currently working on that than if you push that aside or you try to present the shop as having no problems at all and just a fantastic culture. And there's another way that you can do that is let them know something along the lines of, one of the things I want to let you know is we're really working on our work environment and culture. Part of that is we're trying to get a lot better with the way that we work with each other and the way we communicate. So I could really use your help. It's one of the reasons why I think you might be a really good fit for our shop. You seem to be really good at the way you communicate, the way that you associate with others, and I could really use your help in really modeling and coming in and setting a great example for what that looks like, and helping the other folks in the shop understand that everybody's getting better. We've come a long way, but I could really use your help. That might be a way that you can approach it, and it also gives them some responsibility and makes them feel good about their role in it. Another word of warning is don't be starving at the grocery store. So this is another thing I think we've all experienced, right? You contrast two different situations. One, you've eaten something, you're feeling pretty full. You stop at the grocery store or the convenience store. You've got two things you need to pick up. You walk in, you're feeling, again, you've eaten, no problem. Grab those two things, pay, and you are out, ready to go. Now, another day, you had to skip lunch because the shop was super busy. You're trying to do everything you can do. You ended up staying later than you usually do, and you decide, or maybe you spoke to your spouse, and they asked you if you'd stop by the grocery store to pick something up. You planning on doing that, and you walk in and you see that chip aisle, and every single one of those bags just looks great. And all you can think about is, man, that is great. You go down, but before you know it, your cart is absolutely full, and you end up spending 10 times more than you totally planned to. And it's because you were starving when you went to the grocery store. You don't want to do that when you're hiring people. You don't want to take somebody because you've got the job to fill, even when you know that they're not a good fit. One of the things you definitely want to do is ask questions on your values. That is really important. If you have a core value of integrity, you might ask a potential employee, give me an example where you showed integrity even when it would have been easier just to let something go. Ask them very specific questions about core values and make sure that they're a good fit. Also, if you can, and I know it can be difficult in the shop environment with everybody tasked close to 100%, especially at busy times, but include your team members where you can, where it makes sense. If you've got a service advisor or another tech that you want to make sure that this person is going to relate with well, or just somebody you rely on, ask them to spend a few minutes. Maybe it's just 10 to 15 minutes, or maybe it's more if you can afford to give them the time. But ultimately, you want to make sure it's a good fit and that there's good chemistry between everybody involved. So here's a quick recommendation I will give. If you like some business books, this is The Ideal Team Player. Really well written by Patrick Lencioni, fairly short, quick read for the most part, and he does a good job of explaining it. We use it here at Repair Shop Websites, but it's a good model for how to identify ideal team players. 3 key traits for the ideal team player is that they're humble, they're hungry, and they're smart. So that's people smart. They're smart and can work well with people, not that they're an Einstein. Those 3 traits create the ideal team player. Those people who have maybe 2 of the traits or only 1, not necessarily good fits for certain reasons. And in the book, he describes some of that. But it's definitely a good way to look at people. And as you look toward filling roles potentially on your tech team and in other areas, it's a good way to evaluate whether somebody might be a good fit or maybe they won't. All right, so let's spend a few minutes here on keeping great techs. So you've recruited somebody great, or maybe you're really, really happy for the most part with the team you've put together or a good number of people that you have now, and you want to make sure that they're not going to leave. Because if the need for techs is so great, it would seem like people have lots of choices, right? They could leave, whether it's for better work-life balance or for more money. But you want to make sure that they're not thinking about leaving. You want to keep them on board. What are those things that you can do that'll help you? And what you'll find is most often what happens is we all work like crazy to get somebody on board when you're trying to recruit them, and especially when you find a great candidate and you're excited about it and you're talking to them and you spend a lot of time. And unfortunately, then once they start, we kind of forget about them. And sometimes it leaves them to wonder, because during the process, they get a lot of feedback and they're excited, and then they start and they get none and they don't hear from anybody. And it's just not great. So here are some things that you can do that helps work through those situations or prevent them from happening. The first thing is ask them what is important to them. And we're talking about your current employees. If you haven't asked the current employee what's most important to them recently, now's the time to go ahead and do that. Because what often happens is when we recruit people into our organizations, they may be in a different place a few years later than they were then. An example might be you recruit somebody, they've got some young kids, the work-life balance is really important to them. They want to be able to go to the practices, and maybe they need to drop the kids off at school in the morning or preschool or whatever it may be. And then a few years later, we go along thinking, oh yeah, their schedule, that's the most important thing to them. But really what's most important to them is they're in a place now where they really want to build their skills. They're ready to take a step forward. They're ready to maybe take on more responsibility. And if all we're thinking is that their schedule was most important to them, and that's no longer the case, we're not going to know what those things are, and we're not going to be able to get them as help them be as fulfilled as they possibly could be in their job. So make sure to keep in touch or stay, continue to ask, what's most important to you. Similarly, you want to understand their motivations. Different things matter to different people, and sometimes they do change. But you want to make sure that you understand what motivates all of your employees, because they're all going to be a little bit different. Some of them will be motivated by appreciation, a big thank you in front of the team for a job really well done. Some people may be mortified if you try to recognize them in front of people. But if you're able to help them build their skills or help them achieve big goals, give them more responsibility, they may feel great about that. So understand their motivations. Another thing, and this probably goes away from what you're going to hear from almost everybody else. Not everybody is the same, so everybody shouldn't be treated the same. So I don't mean at a base fundamental level. Obviously, you've got to treat all of your employees well and respect them at a base fundamental level. But what I mean is when it comes to things like rewards, not everybody should be treated the same because different people value different things. Maybe for that person who really values the time off, you give them a couple hours paid off after a job well done. Maybe for somebody else, you give them a gift card to a restaurant for them and their spouse. For somebody else, you might be looking at giving them some other type of reward. But by really giving each individual employee the reward that fits them best or that's going to motivate them the most, you're really treating them the way that they want to be treated, and you're going to get the best from them. If somebody speaks up and says, well, hey, you gave this person that, well, why do I get this? Say, well, I thought that this was the thing that you cared most about. Next time, would you prefer if I gave you that? And see what they say. Next thing, recognize and reward great performance and great behavior. So oftentimes we will continue to go through life and things move so fast on the shop floor that you don't take the time to thank people for great performance, and that's a mistake. You want to be sure that you're thanking them for their great performance. The other thing that you want to be sure is to recognize great behavior. So maybe somebody's not the top performer in your shop, but they're the best team player that you have. Make sure to recognize that as well. So you might at a team meeting or at another time just say, hey, I want to recognize this person. The other day when we were just totally slammed, I saw them help 3 of the other techs at different times finish up what they were working on. You're just a great team player and we couldn't do it without you. So make sure that you're recognizing and rewarding both great performance and great behavior. And finally, from that standpoint, you want to make sure you're re-recruiting the people that you have. If somebody is really important to you, if you appreciate what they do, if they bring a lot to your shop on a day in, day out basis, you want to make sure that they know that. One of the worst things that happens, again, similar to when you're recruiting somebody, you make them feel so great about joining your team, and they should. And then over time, you never tell them again that you really appreciate what they do. And then they're just left to wonder. And usually what happens with humans is we fill in a bunch of bad stuff when we don't know the real deal. So that's what can often happen. And so employee that's really one of your top performers that you might say to yourself, man, I couldn't run the shop without that person, ends up feeling like they're not really contributing because you haven't told them again how special they are and how important they are to you and how much they bring to the business. Don't let that happen to you. Make sure that you tell them. And it may be that you do it on an annual basis. Maybe it's 18 months. Maybe it's 2 years. Maybe there's somebody you're thinking about now that you haven't spent enough time recently with and that you need to tell them again. So if it makes sense to do it on a certain plan basis, then do it. If it's more impromptu, that's also totally fine. But make sure they know what they're doing, how important that they are to you in your shop, and what how important their contributions are as well. And tell them that. Say, hey, you've just been great. Can't say enough about the work that you do. You've been a stellar member of the team. We really appreciate you here. And you know, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. Okay. So with that, very quickly, repair shop websites, that's us. We've got more than 2,000 repair shop customers and 13 years of experience building and managing websites for repair shops. Zero contracts, zero added costs for customer support, and websites in most cases made live in 2 business days. Always let us know if we can help you out. And that brings us to the Q&A portion of the presentation. So I'm going to take a quick look here, see if there's any questions. All right, so I do not see any questions. What I will say is if you have any questions, you can certainly reach right out to me. My email address is on there, martin.morgan@repairshopwebsites.com. Also, phone number as well. And in our website, if there's anything that came up in the presentation that you have a question on, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you further about that. Love to talk to shop owners and do what I can to try to help them from a recruiting or retention standpoint. So feel free to give me a call or email at any time. Would be happy to talk to you or exchange emails with you at that point. Otherwise, I want to thank you very much for listening in and watching the webinar. We appreciate you all. And hope to see you at a future webinar or exchange emails or phone calls with you soon. Take care.